At the wedding, I realized the bride wore my stolen necklace and smiled. Because what she didn't know was the necklace was listed as evidence in a $1.5M insurance claim. The necklace hit my face before I could speak. Hard metal and cold gems slammed into my cheekbone with a snap so sharp it cut the music off mid-beat. I stumbled backward as gasps erupted around me. Someone shouted, glass clinked. Somewhere in the far corner, a child started crying. And Sophie, still in her pristine white wedding gown, stood there with her chin tilted high and her lips curled. "That necklace?" she hissed. "Yours? Prove it. Or I swear to God, I'll have you arrested for slander and theft." A thin trickle of blood traced down my cheek. I pressed my napkin to it, silent, and watched Caleb, my son, step between us. "Stop, Sophie," he said, gripping her arm. But he never looked at me. He didn't even glance in my direction. He was looking down, avoiding the guests' eyes as silence built around us like a gathering storm. I held my napkin a little tighter to my face, felt the sting, and then the warmth. My heartbeat was steady. My hands didn't shake. Sophie adjusted her dress, her eyes glinting. "Do you want to ruin my wedding? Huh? Is that your game now?" She laughed, loud and unkind, as if the blood on my face was a punchline. No one ever turned the pendant over. The engraving on the back was so fine and hidden under the setting that it would be overlooked by all but one who had studied its every detail. I looked down at the necklace on the floor. Its gold links coiled like a snake, the sapphires catching the chandelier light like they were on fire. I bent slowly, steadily, and picked it up. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. The clasp was exactly as I remembered. One side had a tiny chip from when I dropped it on the tiles in 1981. The back was engraved with 3 letters, E.G.H., my mother-in-law's initials. I held it up to eye level. Around me, no one moved. Sophie's smile faltered, just slightly. I didn't say a word to her. I turned to the guests, nodded politely, and dabbed my cheek with the napkin once more. And then, I spoke quiet, but clear enough for every guest to hear. "You threw this to see if I would crumble, but I picked it up to see you more clearly." The music didn't resume. The wedding planner fumbled something on her clipboard. Sophie's bridesmaids stood frozen, and my son just rubbed his forehead and whispered something to himself. As I stood there with the necklace in my hand, the past unfolded inside me like an old diary opened by instinct. It was 1964. I was barely 22, standing in front of the mirror in my mother-in-law's parlor. Eleanor Gwendolyn Hargrove had clasped the necklace around my throat and whispered, "Now you're one of us." It wasn't love, it was legacy. The necklace had belonged to her mother before her, and her mother before that. We weren't a family of affection, but one of endurance. That necklace was a rite of passage. I wore it on every anniversary. I wore it to Caleb's christening. I wore it to my husband's funeral. I kept it locked away in a small velvet box inside a hidden drawer until the day it vanished. 10 years ago, burglary. The police chalked it up to a break and no suspects, no leads. I'd been devastated, not because of the money, but because of what it meant. The insurance company processed the claim and sent me a check. I donated most of it anonymously to the Historical Society. But the hurt in my heart remained. And then, 6 months ago, I met Sophie. She was beautiful, polished, clever. Too clever. From the moment I saw her eyes flit toward my jewelry box during their first visit, I had a feeling. And when she pretended to trip and spill red wine on my living room rug right where the floor safe was, I knew. I didn't accuse her then. I didn't scream. I waited. And now, on her wedding day, she'd worn the very thing she thought she'd stolen without consequence. But she hadn't counted on the evidence tag. She didn't know the necklace had been registered in the insurance investigation. She didn't know it was cataloged in high-resolution photographs and logged into a legal file I kept just in case. She thought I was weak. She thought I'd stay quiet. But when she hurled that necklace at my face in front of 200 people, she gave me more than a wound. She gave me a witness. I looked down at the gold in my palm, then up at her again. And I knew, without a flicker of doubt, this day would not end the way she thought. Years before Sophie's wedding day, I tucked away $5,000 into a small safe hidden behind a false panel in my kitchen wall. That money was meant for repairing the leaky roof and buying medicines I could no longer afford on my modest pension. It was a silent security net I never spoke of even to Caleb. One day, I went out for an errand, leaving Sophie at home under the pretense of helping me with chores. I returned to an empty kitchen, no note, no sign of forced entry. I opened the safe. The money was gone. My heart dropped. I ran through every possibility. Snooping neighbors? A break-in? But all the doors were locked, the windows latched. I confronted Sophie gently that evening. "My money, it's gone. Did you see anything odd?" She looked at me, startled, then frowned. "Mom, you're imagining it. I didn't touch your money." I stared at her. She shook her head. "Maybe Marla stopped by. I saw her look at your desk. She's been jealous of you forever." Words like a dagger. Marla was a kind widow who often brought me soup during winters, a gentle neighbor who once helped me carry groceries. Suddenly, Sophie had made her suspect number one. In our tight-knit block, gossip traveled faster than mail. Someone must have seen Marla lingering near my door that day and whispered to a friend. Overnight, the suspicion became certainty in the minds of those who feared scandal. I recall Mrs. Hayes across the street, refusing to meet my eye, murmuring that she could not be caught in controversy. The rumor spread. In our small cul-de-sac, people spoke in hushed tones. "Have you heard? Mrs. Iris thinks Marla stole from her. Marla was seen near the house. Iris is always so suspicious, always imagining wrongs." I confronted Marla quietly one morning, tears in my eyes. She opened the door in her nightgown, confusion in her eyes. "Iris, I would never," she began, but I had already spoken. "They say you stole from me. Do you deny it?" She stammered. She denied it. She pleaded. She cried. But the damage was done. Neighbors who once greeted me warmly crossed the street to avoid my glance. Invitations to lunch dried up. The friendly chatter died at my gate. Marla left town not long after. I heard she sold her home and moved away. She never explained in public. No one asked. The rumor swallowed her reputation whole. Meanwhile, Sophie's cold eyes watched it all. In the evenings, I would see her counting change in her purse, lingering near my safe. I ignored it, telling myself I was too old for suspicion. Then one day, I visited the shop where Sophie claimed to have bought a new purse. I recognized her wallet design immediately, the exact style I once used, an old design long discontinued. I asked politely whether she had that wallet. She denied even owning it. But one afternoon, I caught a glimpse of it. The interior lining was torn, exposing a faded receipt tucked into a slot. That receipt, if I could get hold of it, bore an amount nearly matching $5,000. My heart twisted. I considered calling the police, printing flyers, confronting Sophie publicly. But Caleb, when I mentioned it, begged me, "Mom, don't destroy our family over money. Let it go. Please." So I held back. I retracted the spark in my voice and remained silent. I continued polishing jewelry, smiling when customers clinked coins. But something inside me hardened. I watched the empty houses across the street. I walked down sidewalks once, lined with friendly faces now turned away. I realized I was no longer a neighbor. I was a ghost in the place I once called community. And in that silence, I resolved to wait. Wait until Sophie showed her hand again. Wait until she believed I had no memory left. Wait until the wedding day came. After Sophie's act in the wedding hall, the world inside my own home began to shift. The house became a stage on which I was no longer cast. Invitations to help plan the ceremony no longer came. My voice was not asked when selecting flowers, seating arrangements, or menu tastings. I was not invited to tour the hall, pick linens, or even meet the band. Photographers came for family portraits, but did not place me in the frame. I watched from the margins as bridesmaids giggled in silks. Mothers of the couple adjusted corsages, and I was left behind. Sophie's voice drifted across corridors like a malicious echo. "Just sit where you belong," she said one evening in the living room, arms crossed, arrogance draped in lace. "Don't meddle in grown-ups' affairs." Her tone was low, the words harsh. The statement was aimed not just at me, but at the space I had once claimed as my own. Caleb watched. He perched in the corner, arms folded, swallowing hard. He said nothing. He refused to look at me. When I tried calling his name, asking for a glance of solidarity, he turned his head, pretending the drapes had caught his eye. Each time I mustered courage to speak, then hesitated, Sophie would interject, "You're old, Mother. Don't cause a scene. Let us do this in peace." Her lips curled as she said it, as though she believed the words themselves would silence me for good. I remember one evening, walking into the kitchen to fetch water, when I overheard Sophie speaking in the hallway phone. "He's quiet now. He'll do what's best." Mother's memories make her dangerous if allowed to roam free. In that moment I looked at Caleb, my son, the boy I had held in my arms, taught to tie his shoelaces, read to at night, and saw not the child, but a man stilled by fear and manipulation. I recognized that Sophie had wrapped him around her finger, that he would neither shield me nor protest my erasure. I walked into the room and lowered my voice, but made sure they heard. "I have lived in this house longer than either of you. I bled, whispered prayers, polished silver. And I deserve a place at your table, even if it's the children's table. I deserve a place." Sophie's laugh, brittle, rang. "At the children's table, Mother? You'd spill soup. Stay out of this." She turned away, dismissive, as though I were a storm to be ignored. Later, I sat by an open window, night air cool on my cheek. I thought of my mother-in-law's voice, a whisper from memory. "Women endure, but they remember." I touched my cheek where the light scar remained. The necklace was heavy in my mind, but more heavily its truth pressed. I would not vanish quietly. I understood then, the pain of being erased by those you raised. Sophie was not just pushing me aside, she was trying to ensure I was no longer part of the story. Caleb's silence made him actor in her screenplay. I realized that if I spoke now, they would call me unstable. If I remained quiet, they would call me irrelevant. So I chose to rise. In the days that followed, they held dress fittings, cake tastings, floral arrangements, all without consulting me. I watched them pass by my chair, my presence treated as invisible cloth hung on a wall. One afternoon, as Sophie passed the window trimming ferns, I stepped onto the porch for air. She turned, saw me, and sneered. "Look who came out to breathe." She made a show of smoothing her gown before walking past. Caleb trailed behind her, eyes downcast. I said nothing, but I heard the knot deep inside me tighten. That night I opened my jewelry box, fingers grazing the empty space where the necklace had once rested. My heart ached not only for what was taken, but for what was lost, the sense of place, of voice, of dignity. I resolved then they could take away my role, my presence, even demote me to silhouette, but they could not erase the witness in me. I would watch, I would remember, and when their excuses fell silent, I would speak. I used my old goldsmith's hands to do something I'd never imagined: spy. I placed micro-cameras disguised as buttons, brooches, in shoe shelves, behind the flap of the gown bag, inside the mirror frames. I watched Sophie's routine through those lenses, unseen. Night after night, I sifted through old photographs, images of the original necklace, close-ups from weddings past, the engraving I made meticulously on the back of the gem. I compared them with the one she wore, same engraving, same tiny flaw in the gold border. Then, one evening, the camera in her dressing area caught what I needed. Sophie pacing, phone to ear, voice low. "We only tweak the scratch a little, nobody ever checks the engraving behind the stone." She paused. "If they did, we both lose. Elena, you'll be ready to cover it." My chest tightened. Elena, the name I'd heard whispered in corners but never spoken in proof. My breath came hollow. I rewound, listened again, every word cold. My eyes blurred with anger and something icy. Confirmation. That night, I sent a coded message to my old insurance attorney friend, Iris to attorney. 4 simple words. Evidence new, reopen claim. I attached a blurred screenshot from camera feed, the partial engraving in shadow. It was enough to stir a hornet's nest. Caleb must have seen. The next morning his face was drawn, eyes hollow behind half-closed lids. I watched him avoid meeting me. Sophie cornered him in the hallway, fury in her tone. "Why is she pushing this now? You're letting your mother wreck everything." She spat that last word like venom. He said nothing. I stood in the threshold, saw the gears turning in his mind, the shame, the fear. I knew then. He was no villain of his own, but a man ensnared, puppet to her will. I rechecked the camera logs that evening. One clip, Sophie and Elena meeting at midnight behind the garage. The outline of hands passing something small, maybe tools, maybe the real necklace, maybe instructions. My heart pounded. The war had begun. I reached out quietly to my old friend Marcus, the jeweler who once taught me to set stones, and to a trusted attorney who had handled small estate disputes. I delivered 2 versions of the necklace. One, the original piece I kept safe, and the one Sophie now wore. In Marcus's small workshop under lamplight, he examined both under loupe and microscope. He showed me micro-scratches that aligned precisely with the engraving I did decades ago. The oxidation under the prongs, he said, could not be forged. It grows naturally from years of exposure and cleaning, something no forger could replicate perfectly. The hallmark, EGH, showed identical wear patterns in both necklaces. Even the tiny dent at the rim from 1981 matched. Then came the recordings. I matched the timestamps. Sophie's voice, calm and measured. "We just retouched the scratch. Nobody checks the engraving behind the stone." Then Elena's faint assent. "I'll hold it when you do the work." That conversation was enough to frame a conspiracy. I compiled the photos, the magnified images, the audio files, the workshop report, and the original insurance claim paperwork. I bundled them all and sent them to the insurance company with a letter. "I request your immediate reopening of claim file #32781, as new evidence contradicts prior assumptions." The company confirmed they had archived the old file and were legally obligated under Colorado statutes to retain evidence for at least 15 years, hence they could legally reopen the case. They gave me 72 hours to respond or surrender the item in question. Within 2 days, I received a reply. "We have received your submission. The file is under review. You have 72 hours to respond or to surrender the property in question for inspection, or we will treat this as potential fraud and take legal action." Sophie's face went pale when I read the notice to her in front of Caleb. "They're reopening it," I said quietly. She shook, stuttered to respond. Caleb's jaw clenched. His voice crackled. "You dragged this from the past. Why now?" Sophie shot back. "Because she refuses to vanish." They stood in the living room, hearts pounding, voices rising. Sophie insisted the claim was closed legally. Caleb said he didn't want a scandal. I watched them, feeling the shift of control. The man who once silenced me now looked between us, uneasy. At midnight, I reviewed camera logs again. One clip, Sophie standing by the safe under dim light. Another, Elena holding a polishing cloth over the engraving area. Their movements were cautious. The evidence trail thickened. I lay awake thinking, they thought I had no memory, no resolve. But now, every move they made led me closer, and I was ready. By the time the Denver Gazette ran the headline, "Bride accused of wearing stolen necklace at 5-star wedding," I had learned how fast truth can move in a digital age. The story exploded. Within hours, multiple news outlets picked it up. A local radio anchor aired a clip. The moment Sophie hurled the necklace and the wound on my cheek. They showed my trembling hand, pressing a napkin, the glint of the gems on the floor. That video, shot by a distant guest, spread on TikTok. Hashtags #truth in the necklace and #justice for Iris trended in Denver that evening. 500,000 people watched the clip within 12 hours. Comments flooded. "She has had to carry that silence too long. Iris deserves more than an apology." I saw that sparkle from my seat. She recognized it. Support messages poured in. Strangers messaged me saying they believed me, that they had felt powerless in their own families. Friends I had not spoken to in years called, offering help. One even offered legal aid pro bono. Sophie's world began to falter under that storm. The next morning she was summoned onto a local morning show, City Voices Denver, to explain. The camera panned, her face flushed, her eyes darting. The host asked, "Do you deny wearing Iris's necklace? Do you deny it was stolen?" Her lips parted, then closed. A bead of sweat glinted on her brow. Caleb was subpoenaed to appear as a witness in a preliminary hearing. His name appeared in headlines, "Son of Iris to testify." Friends and colleagues texted him. His business partners watched articles. Then came the email from Marla. She published a blog post, shared on social media. "I was that neighbor once blamed. Many of you turned away from me when I came to your doors in tears. I listened, I believed Sophie's lies, and I failed Iris when I should have stood beside her. I am sorry." That post went viral in the same feed as my interviews. The symmetry struck people. A wronged neighbor seeking reconciliation. Communities commented, reposted, raised voices for Iris. One evening, a local news crew came to my residence inside the same room where I had once been humiliated. A cameraman set up. The reporter asked, "Mrs. Iris, how do you feel now that millions have seen that moment?" I stood in that gentle lamplight, hand aloft, necklace in my palm, face still bearing the faint scar. I said, "I have been silent for years because my voice was judged, misunderstood. Today, I stand so truth may be heard." My voice cracked once, but held firm. The camera zoomed on my eyes, on the scar, on the necklace glinting softly. Sophie appeared on the news clip, tearful and embattled, stumbling over words. Caleb sat beside her in the interview, eyes averted from mine. Elena's name surfaced in rumors. Some guests claimed they saw her backstage photographing gowns. She denied it in text messages, but the public had seen what they'd seen. At night I lay awake, hearing alerts chime, messages arrive, my phone buzzing. The man I raised, my son, lay in the next room, perhaps reading the same headlines I had posted. The world had begun to shift. The false version of our family was cracking under the weight of truth. And I whispered aloud, "They counted me as nothing, but I am everything they never wanted me to be." By dawn, the Denver Press ran a front-page feature. "Grandma speaks, the woman the whole city heard." Across town, Sophie's wedding cake sat unsliced. The guests posted memories of the dress, the bouquets except for that necklace. That necklace was now a symbol, a reckoning, a memory rewritten. I entered the law office early, before most of them arrived, and sat quietly in a side chair. The room was elegant, with polished mahogany, a long conference table, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Denver skyline. In my hand I held a plain white envelope, my own final words, though I was not gone. I heard footsteps in the hall. One by one they came, Caleb, pale and stiff, Sophie, trembling in her gown, Elena, quiet, shoulders tight. Others too, cousins and guests, the lawyers. They assumed I would be absent dead, or too frail to attend. That was their assumption. The lead attorney, Mr. Rourke, stood and cleared his throat. "We are assembled today for the reading of the last will and testament of Mrs. Iris Larkin. I will now present Exhibit A." A screen behind him rippled to life. There I was, seated in my favorite armchair, necklace visible, speaking with calm clarity. "I am not gone. I live still. But today I read not an obituary. I read a judgment. You will hear my will. Let it also be my voice." Gasps shook the room. Eyes darted. Sophie's breath caught. Caleb's face went ashen. Elena tried to shrink in her seat. Mr. Rourke picked up a document. His voice firm. Clause 1. Sophie Marie Larkin is hereby removed entirely from any right to inherit, to receive, or to participate in any portion of my estate, whether financial, real property, or personal effects, including the necklace formerly belonging to me. A murmur rose. Sophie's hand flew to her mouth. Caleb's eyes closed. Elena shifted in her seat, pale. Clause 2. Caleb Larkin is ordered to return any funds, property, or items he has taken from Iris's accounts or name, whether knowingly or unknowingly, within 90 days of this reading. If he fails to comply, Those assets will pass to the charitable foundation I establish here. Caleb swallowed hard. His throat moved, but no words came. Clause 3. Elena Marie Johnson née Larkin is named as co-conspirator in the unauthorized alteration and possession of my property. She is expressly disinherited and barred from all claims or benefits, now or hereafter, from my estate. Elena's face blanched. She looked at Sophie, then away. Clause 4. Marla Henderson, my former neighbor and dear friend, who suffered implied blame because of the false rumors circulating, I require that she be invited to stand and make a public apology for what she was forced to endure as a result of Sophie's defamation. This apology shall be documented in writing and read aloud before this assembly to fulfill a part of my moral restitution. There was silence. Mr. Rourke passed Marla a trembling envelope. She rose slowly, face lined with years of sorrow and regret. The room still. She cleared her throat. I, Marla Henderson, stand before Mrs. Iris and all assembled to apologize. I regret that I believed the accusations leveled at me. I regret the distance I allowed to grow. I apologize for my silence and for the shame you bore. I was wrong. Mrs. Iris, would you accept this apology at last? Her voice broke. She lifted her eyes to me. I nodded, accepting. Some in the room sniffled. Then Sophie, tears streaming now, stood abruptly. You have no right. You can't do this to me. I wore the necklace openly. Her voice cracked. She collapsed into sobs. Caleb whispered, voice shaking, Mother, I'm sorry. But the word was lost in the storm. Elena sat rigid, inscrutable, unmoved. I rose. My heart thumped, but my voice was steady. You threw that necklace at me in front of guests to test me, but I did not break. I picked it up, not because I needed a jewel, but because I needed to see you clearly. I paused. You once told me it was a game. You forgot. I never played. I endured. So now I judge with law, with witness, with voice. I stared at Sophie. The scar on my cheek gleamed faintly. The necklace in my palm glinted in the light. Silence hugged the room. Sophie turned away to weep. Caleb's shoulders sagged. Elena stared at her lap. Mr. Rourke closed his book. This estate is now settled as per the decedent's unalterable wishes. Meeting adjourned. As people rose, some wept, some stared, some whispered. I left the podium last, walking past the stunned faces of my own blood. I held the necklace tightly in my hand, not as a trophy, but as a testament. That night, when I lay in bed at my small cottage, I felt a quiet victory, not for anger, but for truth. And for the family I had once been erased from, I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, and my place in their memory. A year has passed since that day of reckoning. The house I once lived in now belongs to the Iris's Light Foundation, and I moved into a gentle, sunlit, assisted living residence funded by the settlement and the estate I crafted. The place has wide porches, lavender gardens, quiet reading nooks, a sanctuary I never expected, but one I now call home. Iris's Light has grown beyond my wildest hopes. We have housed over 100 elderly people who were abandoned, neglected, or dismissed. We teach them crafts, knitting, weaving, small metalwork, and especially the art of making jewelry from scrap silver. It is slow, meditative work, polishing, filing, hammering. It gives them something tangible and beautiful, from fragments much like rebuilding dignity from broken trust. Tonight is our one-year anniversary gala. I sit at the head table, soft lights above, guests in elegant attire. Around my neck is the restored necklace, the same piece Sophie once hurled at me. Now it glints not as a weapon, but as a symbol. Reclaimed, reforged, a testament. The engraving is sharp again. The sapphire gleams. I feel the weight of it settle comfortably against my chest, a familiar friend. Before I rise to speak, I pause and tell them a short memory. I once wrote a letter to Marla, the neighbor, who was wrongly blamed because I believed a lie. She did not have to forgive me. But she surprised me. She wrote back saying she never hated me, only grieved that I would not trust her. We have promised when the lavender blooms next summer in Colorado to sit down and sip tea as two people, Friends, perhaps, finally meeting in peace. A murmur of approval ripples through the audience. Some faces glisten with tears. I stand, careful and steady, ready. My life has changed, but not in the way I imagined. Sophie was found liable in civil court for misappropriation of my property. The judgment forbids her from ever engaging in jewelry trade or handling valuable personal assets. The court ordered restitution, penalties, and she must surrender any proceeds she gained illegally. The news articles speak of it as a fall from grace. She is a warning now, a cautionary tale. Caleb, my son, has lost almost everything. The business he ran closed. He sold the home he and Sophie shared. He now lives with his sister, estranged from his wife. He wears a beard he cannot care for and slouches in chairs that are too large. When he sees cameras, his eyes drift away. He is a man diminished, shaped by regret and the weight of choices. Elena's name, once whispered in fashion circles, is now scrubbed from portfolios. Designers rescinded offers when clients searched her name and found scandal. She moved away from Denver, resettled in another state under a muted identity, vanished from the spotlight. The gala ends. The guests rise. I clasp the microphone one last time, necklace gleaming in the soft overhead glow. I speak. They thought I was breathing just to stay alive, but now I breathe to be heard. To unmask those who hide cruelty beneath beautiful facades. I will continue to breathe not just to survive, but to heal the wounds they believed they severed. I will breathe until every silence caused by fear is answered, and I will breathe to restore all they tried to bury. I lower the mic. Applause rises, slow at first, then swelling. Some guests weep, others stand, resolute. The room feels full, alive, affirming. I step down, pass the necklace to a young woman at Iris's light, someone who lost everything but wants to build something. I smile at her. She touches the gem reverently. Outside, lavender petals drift in the evening breeze. I breathe deeply. The scars remain on my cheek, in my heart, but tonight they glow in memory, not shame. Iris's light will carry on. Sophie's name will fade. Caleb will understand one day, or he may never. Elena's anonymity will follow her. But I will live in light, not shadow. I will keep breathing, telling, rebuilding, because someone must stand when others fall silent. And this night is not my end. It is my beginning. I never expected the day would come when I would walk beside Marla beneath lavender skies, sipping tea on a porch of a mountain town somewhere, sharing laughter instead of rumors. Yet here we are. A year later, we found ourselves in Colorado Springs, at a small inn surrounded by fields of purple blossoms. The same sunlight that once highlighted shadows now warmed our faces equally. We had agreed to meet quietly, one afternoon after the gala, when the dust had settled. Marla arrived in a simple linen dress, hair streaked with silver, her eyes a little heavy with the years she spent under suspicion. We greeted one another with a hug neither of us expected, but both heartily needed. I poured tea from a white porcelain pot onto dainty cups. The lavender breeze carried its scent to my nose, and I felt as though the air itself had healed a wound I did not know still bled. I watched Marla's hand hover before returning the cup to the saucer. "Marla," I began, voice gentle but strong, "I owe you this apology. I never spoke. I believed the lies. I judged you wrongly. I accused you without proof, and I watched you fade from our lives as though you were guilty. I am sorry for doubting your heart." She looked at me, eyes soft. "I never hated you, Iris. I was hurt. I left, but I carried your name in my heart. I wondered if someday you'd see the mistake." She paused. "Thank you for asking me back." We sat in silence for a while, sipping tea, the world quiet but alive. The lavender fields whispered in lilac waves beyond the railing. I felt peace in that silence, a gentle surrender of the epoch I had carried inside. A few days later we traveled together. We drove down to Glenwood Springs, where hot springs steam beside mountain cliffs. We walked along the riverbanks, clasped hands under cottonwood trees, and let our laughter echo in canyon walls. We visited Crested Butte, wandered timbered streets, and took pictures beside wildflowers. We made bracelets from tumble-polished stones. I brought from my old workshop silver wire, shards of quartz, small bits of blue lapis. I taught her how to bend the wire, align the stones, solder gently, just as I once showed Sophie how to polish gems years ago. Now, I showed Marla. At night, beneath stars, we spoke. She told me how sorrow bit her when folks crossed the street to avoid her, how she sold her home and left the town breathing broken. I told her of nights I lay awake, replaying her name, wishing I'd held on to trust instead of letting rumors steal a dear friendship. We never spoke of Sophie in anger. The memory of that betrayal lay behind us like a mountain range, visible but distant. In those moments, we were simply two women who lost decades of companionship to cruelty and fear. On the day before my departure, we sat in the garden, under a lavender arbor. I placed my hand on hers. Marla, in those years I was trapped in suspicion. I thought freedom meant proving what was mine. But now I know true freedom means releasing what was never mine to keep the guilt, the bitterness, the silence. I am free now, free from fear, free from doubt. Marla nodded, tears glistening. And I am free to forgive, she whispered. When I left, she walked me to the door. She handed me a small pouch of dried lavender and a handwritten letter. I hope your nights are sweeter. I hope your heart rests in light. I clasped it to my chest. Now, I sit in my room here in the assisted living home. I place the restored necklace around my neck and look in the mirror. When I do, I see not a victim but a survivor. I see the cut on my cheek, faint but healed, and the strength in my posture. Iris's light continues. The women I teach, from once forgotten ladies to grandmothers with haunted eyes, make small silver pendants. We trade stories, hands intertwining, laughter and tears. We call them fragments of healing. We gift them to each other, to visitors, as reminders. Beauty can arise from broken pieces. My legacy is not vengeance. It is a reclamation, reclaiming my name, my voice, my presence. It is community restored. It is seeing Marla's face not in whispers but in sunlight. And so, I breathe. I breathe not only to survive but to testify. I breathe for those women believing their voices are silenced. I breathe to stitch open wounds with truth. I breathe until the day I no longer need breath to be heard. Because now, with Marla beside me, I know I am free. And free, I step forward not into darkness, but into a dawn of my own choosing. Thank you for staying with me until the very last breath of this story. Iris' courage, her resilience, and her quiet, unwavering pursuit of justice remind us all that no one is ever too old to rise or to teach a lesson that echoes far beyond pearls and gemstones. If this story moved you, shocked you, or made you cheer inside, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our family here at Grandma True Stories. Every week, we bring you real tales of strength, survival, and the sweet satisfaction of karma, served cold, all from voices who refuse to be forgotten. Subscribe, like, share, and let the world hear the stories they never expected from the people they thought were done speaking. Until next time, keep listening and keep believing in second breaths.